The Capitals fall to the Penguins in one of the most important games of the season.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holney. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. I would love to talk Capitals hockey with you one-on-one, and we can do that on subtext. Just check the show description for more details. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the game tonight, the game that many say was the most important game of the season as far as playoff implications, and the Capitals fall again, dropping 4 games in a row. What is the identity of this team? I talk about that quite often. It's easy to ride the high, and it's hard to ride down into the lows. It is a lot like a roller coaster. We take a look at the West Coast road trip. We were riding a high that, wow, this Capitals team is really dialed in. But now they come crashing back to earth. What went wrong? We'll talk about that a little bit later. We will talk about how the Capitals' playoff hopes are dimmer after the loss today. And then we'll talk about how did the Capitals get here. So this was the game of utmost importance. I talked about that against the Sabres, that they must win that game, and they lost that game. And I said, the game tonight against the Penguins could very well be the most important game of the entire season as far as the Capitals' playoffs hopes are concerned. And what do? Boom, facepalm once again. This is not a good thing. And let's just talk about this candidly, Capitals fans here, is that how they've played here as of late. If they were in the playoffs right now, say the playoffs started tonight, how confident would you feel this team would do in the first round of the playoffs? Go ahead, hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218 or at Locked On Caps. Let me know your thoughts, or on YouTube, and say, if the playoffs started today, how confident would you feel in the way that this Capitals team is playing? And how do you think they would fare in the first round of the playoffs? Do you think they would make it past the first round, or do you think that they would be extinguished quickly? I'm kind of leaning towards the direction that even if they find a way to back into victory, which is starting to seem more and more remote, if they do, in fact, somehow find a way to make it to the playoffs, I don't feel real confident. And all the key pieces are pretty much out there. I know that we're minus TJ Oshie, and I don't think that that would have been a game changer. The Capitals lost quite handily tonight. I know it wasn't as big of a blowout as some of the other games, but my confidence is waning here a little bit as we are in the waning days of the regular season for the NHL. This was a game that Caps really needed to win, and what happened? The Capitals fell on their face again as they fell to their bitter rival Pittsburgh Penguins. The Capitals are definitely now on the outside looking in as far as the Eastern Conference playoff picture. I was hopeful, and now all of a sudden the Pittsburgh Penguins might be in it. All of a sudden the Islanders might be in it, and now the Capitals are on the outside looking in. It's tough. Towards the end of the game, you saw all the people filing out of the game with about 5 minutes left in the game. The writing was on the wall. I don't blame them. They wanted to beat traffic. But I think that, we were hopeful after this last Western Coast road trip here. There was hope. They took down the Jets. They took down the Canucks, the Flames. They were riding a high. They found a way to take down the Red Wings, but now they're coming crashing back to reality. And it's tough because when they needed to win the games the most, they are struggling. The Capitals have 82 standing points, one behind the Islanders. In the wild card race, the only thing the Capitals have over the Isles is games in hand. And we hear that a lot. And at some point, that's not going to matter because if you keep losing all the games, it's not going to matter how many games in hand you have. You're just losing them all. So I'll talk about in the last segment what the Capitals have to do, as there is no time to wallow in your misery. The Capitals will be back in action against a formidable opponent in the Carolina Hurricanes. The Islanders defeat the Blue Jackets 4-2. They'll move 1 point ahead of the Caps into the second wildcard spot. Also tied with the Flyers for third in the Metro, but Flyers hold the tiebreaker. So it's tightening up. The Metro is tightening up, and the Capitals did not do themselves any favors. They didn't do the fans. They didn't do anyone any favors by losing. And it's tough. It just seems like they didn't understand the gravity of the situation that they were in. And just another game that they simply got outworked by a Pittsburgh Penguins team that, I hate to say it, is on the rise. The Capitals appeared to have gained momentum before this 4-game losing streak. It was like the Caps didn't understand the gravity of this game, and the Penguins were well aware. The Caps suffered from some bad bounces, and urgency was just not there. A 4-1 loss for the Caps with only 7 games left to play is definitely not what the doctor ordered. But don't tell that to Alex Ovechkin. He still has faith in this team. Yeah, we still in the battle. We just have to keep fighting, That's it. And that's the advice of the captain of your Washington Capitals, Alex Ovechkin. Of course, if he said it was all over with, then I think you may as well just wave the white flag. It's over. This was also the game that saw the return of Tom Wilson. We know what he means for this team, but ultimately, even Tom Wilson, the future captain, was not enough to help lift the Capitals over the Penguins. According to Money Puck, the Capitals had is the operative word, a 54.6% odds of making the playoffs coming into Thursday. With the loss, however, that percentage dropped 15.3% to 39.3%. Again, you cannot squander these opportunities. You've got to find a way to win these games of utmost importance. And what do the Capitals do? Facepalm, lose a game. It's a tough thing as a Capitals fan, as I was really feeling confident. And if you're an everydayer of the show, you know as much as I talked about that. Brian McClellan at the trade deadline, he didn't make any big moves because he believed that they were all in, and I was drinking that Capitals Kool-Aid. I was like, yeah, Brian McClellan, you were so right. You just knew it all. As it turns out, the Capitals did need to make some more moves. As the teams that are getting better, some of those teams were the ones that went out and made the big moves. Not all of them, but some of them are. I think the Capitals would have been better served to go out and try and do something, because now I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's improbable that the Capitals make it to the playoffs. Yes, quite an about face from just a few games ago, that unless the Capitals can really pour it on, or the other teams in the Metro start to falter, it's going to be difficult. And again, I get back to my main point. Even if somehow, some way, they can make it to the playoffs, how confident are we that they will do anything, that they'll make it past the first round? Ultimately, that's what it's all about. I think it would be a step of improvement, making it to the playoffs, given the fact that they lost it last season. A good feather in the cap, I guess, of Spencer Carberry in his first year with the team. He took them to the playoffs. I get all that. But also the gravity of the situation if the Capitals, in fact, do not make it to the playoffs, that Spencer Carberry was not able to do a better job than Peter Laviolette to take this team over the top. We can talk about final points, and all of that ultimately doesn't matter to me. For me, I'm a black and white. I'm a salt and pepper guy. I don't like gray area. Either you made it to the playoffs or you didn't make it to the playoffs. I don't care about, well, they had more points than they did last year. Mumbo jumbo, don't care. They didn't make it. Again, as you walk away from this podcast, I don't want to say that they're not going to make it. I'm just going to say it is going to be an extremely uphill battle and not an optimal situation, as I was quite optimistic, I guess I got to say, last week, that my hopes have been dashed. I hope I'm wrong, and the Capitals can find a way to turn it around. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, we will talk about the game tonight in particular. Yes, we must do the post-mortem on another ugly loss for the Capitals. Let's discuss straight ahead. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So despite the outcome and whatever happens this season, the Capitals Locked On Capitals podcast will be here for you year round. Nothing changes. That is one thing that you know for sure, is that I will be talking Capitals hockey with you year round. Most of the time, 5 days a week, if not more. There's a couple of weeks in the middle of the summer that it's 3 days a week, but by and large, this is a Capitals podcast that is here for you 5 days a week minimum. So make sure and subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals. And thanks to everyone. I want to get this out of the way in case there's people that start saying, hey, the Capitals are done. I want you guys to know that the show grew by leaps and bounds, and I have you guys to thank. And just know this show is not going anywhere. We will have your Capitals coverage all summer. But let's get into the game tonight. An ugly one, a game that I was hopeful for. It was a game that saw the return of Tom Wilson. Chucky Sideburns was going to be in net. All the young pieces, everything that got us hyped just a few weeks ago. Well, that hype is starting to wane as Kuznetsov left and Backstrom stepped away from this team. And this team has faced injuries with TJ Oshie and Tom Wilson getting suspended. That there has been some good, there's been some bad with this season. And it's a difficult thing. As we take a look at it, the Capitals lose in a game of great implications. And what went wrong ultimately? I think that they ultimately started the game on the right foot, but things got out of hand in a hurry. The Caps got off to a fairly good start and were generating chances. They just had an extremely hard time getting it past Nedeljkovic. Excuse me, it's a difficult one to say. Nedeljkovic. Ryan Shea is got it going for the Pens. Again, not a name I'm super familiar with, Ryan Shea, but in any event, he got the scoring going for the Penguins. The Caps were on their heels trying to claw their way back in. And it's one of the things that is statistically known about the Capitals and a lot of other teams as well, is they struggle when they're playing from coming from behind with a deficit. And it was no exception in the game tonight as the Capitals struggled. And then Pierre-Olivier Joseph finds the back of the net and the wheel is really starting to wobble for the Caps. So all of a sudden the Capitals are down by 2 and it's uncomfortable. The Capitals were struggling, trying to get any momentum going against a Penguins team that, surprise, is on the rise. This was a team that was, not one of the better teams in the Metro not too long ago, and they're coming on strong. And it's kind of, one of the things that's rubbing salt in the wounds. It's one thing if the Capitals lose to a team that they play maybe 1 or 2 games a year, but a bitter rival, a long-standing bitter rival like the Pittsburgh Penguins, that salt burns more than others. All hope wasn't lost in the Caps. I thought they were still in it ultimately. Even after the first period, I thought the Caps were going to find a way to rally, as they've done that before. I mean, we think back to the Jets game. We think to other games where they were coming back from a deficit. I thought there was at least a possibility. Then there was the second period where the wheel really started to wobble for the Caps. The Pens were leading 10-5 in shots. And this is something I talked about in the last game. I think that the Caps were trying to get too cutesy, that there were opportunities that they could have shot the puck and they decided to pass. Okay, this is just some advice, and this is coming from not an NHL player, but a guy that has watched every game this season, is pepper the netminder with as many shots as you possibly can, and good things will happen. Either you're A, going to find the back of the net, or B, there could be a juicy rebound and you can make good on a second or third opportunity. But to try to do the cutesy thing, to like, hey, I'm going to go for it and then just shoot it to this other guy, that has not paid off too well for the Capitals. Lindgren did what he could do, ultimately stopping 20 of 23. It was the same story as the Sabres game where the Caps overpassed, like I talked about. Spencer Carberry also did what he could do by mixing up the lines to try to generate some offense. You got to give it to Spencer Carberry. He didn't just lay down and play dead. He did what he could do. It just ultimately wasn't enough. This young Capitals team, that maybe some of the inexperience, Hendricks, Lapierre, Connor McMichael, even Miroshnichenko, are they answering the bell in games with great implications? We saw them, really step up in the games earlier in the season, but we have not seen that production from them here as of late. And it makes a lot of questions come into mind about what we do next season. But in any event, in this game, I think that maybe some of the inexperience is starting to creep in, where in previous years they had the snarled old vets that had been there and done that. It's just things to ponder as the Capitals come off yet another big loss. But taking a look at it here, the Caps were generating chances in the third, out shooting the Pens 17-8. When Alex Ovechkin scores his 27th of the season, they should have had that going in the first 40. Again, I say it all the time. Everyone says it all the time. Play a 60-minute game. You can't, expect to pour it on in the last 20 and think you're going to win a hockey game. Sometimes, but I wouldn't plan it on the regular. It's just not something that happens. John Carlson and Ovi both had 8 shots on net, so the snarled old veterans on the team, they were the ones that were getting the contributions. And there was determination on Alex Ovechkin's face. There was him clenching his jaw, and you could tell he was none too happy with the Capitals' performance out there, and especially against a team that is a bitter rival, a team that he's faced for years, that's gotten into fisticuffs with Sidney Crosby over in years past, that it burns extra hot. It burns white hot when the Capitals lose to the Pens. It was a big, stick in the finger to them when the Capitals destroyed them the first time, but then all of a sudden that loss has been mellowed, the victory was mellowed with the loss tonight. So in any event, I don't want to wallow down in misery here too much, but the Capitals, they got to brush it off as they have a big game coming up against the Hurricanes, and they've got to be ready. But the one thing I will say, and one of the things that I think put the Capitals in a pretty good position, is it was great to have Tom Wilson back in the mix. He had 5 hits and 2 penalty minutes. So Tom Wilson doing what he can do to be that physical presence out there. I know that ultimately it wasn't enough, but I think the Capitals play that much better when Tom Wilson is on the ice. So to wrap it up, I guess, I wish I could talk to you guys right now about a victory, and the Capitals are sitting pretty as far as their playoff hopes are concerned. However, that is not the case. The only thing we can do, listen, I can't rewind time. If you're a married guy and maybe you've argued with your wife and they're like, well, you said this or you said that. And sometimes the mic drop for me is like, I can't rewind time. I said it. I can't rewind time. I'm sorry. I'm moving on. Same thing goes for the Capitals here. I'm sure they're sorry that they didn't play better, but they can't rewind time. They got to get ready for the next one. And the next one is tomorrow, Friday evening against the Hurricanes. They got to be ready. They're not out of it, but they've got to find a way to pick up a win tomorrow. Make no mistake about it. If they lose tomorrow, I'm just telling you that then we're starting to talk into very minute possibilities of them making the playoffs. We don't want it to get to that. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, we will talk about how did the Capitals get where they are right now. Again, it was last week that I was riding high and talking to you guys about who they might play in the first round of the playoffs and where they're going to seed and all this kind of stuff. A lot has changed here recently. How did the Capitals get here? I'll discuss coming up. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So how did the Capitals get here right now? On the outside looking in, dropping 4 games in a row when they were just recently here, were riding a high after their last West Coast road trip, I guess is what we could talk about. Let's kind of take a look back and see where the train went off the track. So we take a look at the Capitals. On March 20th, they played the Maple Leafs, and we know the Capitals have struggled against the Maple Leafs. They lost by a score of 7-3. The Caps over the Hurricanes 7-6. The Capitals over the Jets 3-0. The Red Wings 4-3. And then that's when things went south, because when the Capitals then played the Maple Leafs again on March 28th, they fell 5-1. The Capitals lost to the Bruins 3-2. They lost to the Sabres 6-2. And then they lost the game tonight by a score of 4-1. So let's just take a look at it. The Maple Leafs were definitely the ones that caused the wheel to wobble. They were the pothole that the Capitals hit squarely, and they need a front end alignment. They don't have a lot of time, and we're hoping there's a garage open that can get this wheel going. So because the Maple Leafs, they threw a curveball when the Capitals were sitting on a fastball, and it was a swing and a miss. The Capitals have got to find a way to turn it around. The Bruins, again, a team that they played well against earlier in the season, they lost 3-2. The Sabres was the one that they should have won. And then, of course, the game tonight as well. So taking a look at the schedule ahead, the schedule doesn't do the Capitals any favor. They take on the Hurricanes, which are pretty good. I guess if there is a game in the mix, I think the Capitals could win. It's the Senators. And then they take on the Red Wings, which we know the Red Wings have given the Capitals fits from time here, there. Another rematch against the Sabres. You take a look at the Lightning, who, I don't know if you're aware, but they've won quite a few Stanley Cups. And then the Bruins, and then they close out the season with the Flyers. Yes, that Flyers team with John Tortorella pushing the buttons, ruffling feathers everywhere he goes on that team, undercutting his team when they're playing better than most anyone had picked them as playing at this point. Everyone thought the Flyers were still going to be in a rebuild and, cellar dwelling. And look at it. Look at what John Tortorella has done, despite, his antics and how he is, I'm just going to go ahead and say, mean to a lot of his players. He gets results. Subsequently, oftentimes, he also alienates himself from the locker room, and that's when he is shown the door. But he's getting the Flyers in a position that no one had seen before, and that is who the Capitals will play in the very last game of the season. I don't think it'll come down to the last game of the season. The Capitals, if they can muster, if they can conjure up any of the 2018, I believe, then maybe there's a chance, but they are definitely on the outside looking in. The Hurricanes are going to throw the kitchen sink at the Capitals. You take a look at the Ottawa Senators, you don't know what to expect from that team from 1 minute to the moment. Don't just look exclusively at the standings. Sometimes that team has played spoiler for the Capitals in the past, so it's going to be difficult. And then again, like I say, the Lightning, that is going to be difficult. The Capitals are not going to have any easy games, and it's going to be difficult. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people that blame their schedule later in the season if the Capitals don't, in fact, make it to the playoffs, that's why they didn't make it. Hey, they didn't make it to the playoffs, but their schedule is really tough towards the end of the year, man. Nonsense. I hate when fans start cutting the team excuses. Well, they would have done good, but didn't. Again, get back into I'm a black and white, not a gray guy. Either you win or you lost. That's it. I don't want to hear, but no, you're out. And that's where the Capitals are at. And I don't want to hear any fans out there saying, well, it was a tough schedule. They didn't do it. Brian McClellan decided to push all of his chips in on this lineup. He could have done something. He did nothing. And all the people out there that were up in arms when I talked about Charlie Lindgren and, oh my God, you can't get rid of Charlie Lindgren. How has he played here as of late? And again, I know that a lot of it has to do with the defense folding, but could you imagine the return the Capitals could have got and ultimately will get for Charlie Lindgren? Huge. I mean, I think that, Mac wanted to maximize his return, and ultimately that wasn't what he thought was the return. And then you take a look at the moves out there. Nick Dowd. We kept Nick Dowd. How is that working for the Capitals? How's Nick Dowd helped this team here recently? Max Pacioretty. Nothing burger. Nothing burger's up. Who ordered the nothing burger? Max Pacioretty. Your order's here. That's what I'm talking about here. That the Capitals decided to go and hang on to these players that everyone's like, you can't move this guy. You can't move that guy. What's Nick Dowd done for us? I'm not trying to diminish what he's done for this team in total, but what has he done for this team right now? I'm going to go ahead and say that if you would have shipped him out to Edmonton or wherever else and we would have got a handsome return, maybe the Capitals would be in a better position in the playoffs, because I hate when people also say, living on blind hope and blind faith. Well, next year they're going to be better. Based on what? Are you going to add Ryan Leonard to the mix? Is that going to help them? Sure. But then again, Leonard can't save this team either. This team is coming up on a rebuild that a lot of Capitals fans really need to have a come to Jesus moment about with here. Yeah, again, you took a look at the Nationals. It was tough. They're going to be good in years, again, potentially. That the Capitals, if they want to keep, riding out this lineup as long as they can, then they're going to have to be okay with being extinguished quickly or not making it to the playoffs at all. Because let's even just take a look at the last time the Capitals made it to the playoffs against the Panthers, extinguished in a hurry. That was the one where Tom Wilson screwed his knee up. Last season, they didn't make it to the playoffs at all. This team's trajectory is going down. Oftentimes when things are going well, they say the arrow's pointing up. The arrow's not pointing up for this team right now. I hate to say it. They've had glimpses. They've had flashes. They've had stretches of greatness. But by and large, if I'm going to summarize this season, it's been disappointing. You can kind of, take a look at the good points. And sometimes when you concentrate and you're laser focused on good things, that sometimes subtracts the bad things. Not for me. I don't remember, or I don't forget the Capitals having a difficult time stringing together victories this season. I don't forget it. And that's ultimately why the Capitals are in the position that they're in right now. Again, and I don't want to, put it all on Brian McClellan, but he is the general manager of the team. He was the one that should have made the tough decision that the Capitals fans didn't want to happen. He should have moved Nick Dowd and got a big return. He should have moved Charlie Lindgren and got a big return. He should have moved Max Pacioretty and got whatever return he could get for him. And what did they do? They moved Edmondson and Mantha and Kuznetsov. And is this team any better minus Anthony Mantha? I'm going to go out here and say on a limb that the Capitals would probably be better right now with Anthony Mantha on this team. It's true. For a good chunk of the season, he was one of the top offensive contributors to this team, and they don't have him anymore. I'm just feeling very upset. I'm feeling very kind of negative about what this team did or the lack of what they did, because that is why we're in the position that we're in right now. And that's a sour taste in your mouth that you're not going to be able to get rid of with any kind of mouthwash. It's going to burn. And that's the thing that the Capitals fans are going to be thinking about this summer. Woulda, shoulda, coulda, didn't. And that's one of the things that burns kind of white hot for me, is that people didn't want to make the moves. And, at the time when the Capitals were playing well, I thought to myself, hey, they did the right thing by keeping Charlie Lindgren. As it turns out, it was all fool's gold. It was a mirage. The team wasn't built for it. Again, I will apologize, of course, if the Capitals make it to the playoffs. But even if they do, I stand by my statement, even if they do make it to the playoffs, that this team currently constructed is not built for a Stanley Cup. And if you take a look at the teams that are doing really, really well, the teams that really pushed all their chips in, those are the teams that I think are built for making a push for the Stanley Cup. The Capitals have got to get back to being built for a Stanley Cup push. That's what it's all about. It's not making it to the playoffs. That's good. getting a cup, bringing another cup under the Alex Ovechkin era is of paramount importance. And I think that is something that needs to be underlined and emphasized and cranked up to 10. Is that, it's good that Alex Ovechkin can catch Gretzky, and we hope that he can. But I want one more cup under the Alex Ovechkin era. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And again, thanks to everyone that listens to the show on a daily basis, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. You are the ones that make this show great and successful, and I am forever in your debt. I really thank you guys a lot for joining me each and every day, talking Capitals hockey. Even when I'm irritated, it's the highs and the lows. It's all part and parcel of talking about your favorite sports team. So when you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel, available on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app or on YouTube. So once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.